I started writing for a newspaper in 2002. I started writing for a company called the Journal Register Company. So I've been in journalism for, this is my 24th year, maybe 25th if I go back and see where my first story was published. But that was a time when newspapers were going out of business. So I decided that broadcasting would probably be a more stable future. And I turned out to be right with that. So I went to Temple University, got a master's degree. I then started my broadcasting career in 2005. I wrote for newspapers for 2 or 3 years and did that. My first job was in Casper, Wyoming. I went 2,000 miles west, and this is just the life that TV reporters live. I spent 2 years in Casper, Wyoming. I then spent 3 years in Madison, Wisconsin. I then spent 4 years in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, where I started doing investigative reporting covering the Capitol. And that's where my first book, Capital Murder, was written, which is about the bankruptcy of Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and how it happened. And then from Harrisburg, I went to Washington, D.C. I worked for the ABC News affiliate there, launched the I-Team for the ABC News affiliate, and then I got the call from my company to start this thing called Project Baltimore. So in January of 2017, I moved from Washington, D.C. to Baltimore to start Project Baltimore. So what exactly is Project Baltimore? Well, we work for Fox 45 News, which is owned by Sinclair Broadcasting, which is based in Hunt Valley. And there's 5 of us. There's 2 photographer editors, there's 2 producers, and there's me as the reporter. And it's very rare in local television journalism to have that type of resource put forth, which is why I left Washington, D.C., which is a much larger market, to come to Baltimore because of the opportunity to be on a 5-person team that is devoted to investigative journalism. And we picked education in January of 2017 to be our first topic because things didn't seem to make sense when it comes to public education. So specifically for Baltimore City, we could see in January of 2017 that Baltimore City was one of the most funded large school systems in America. We know that. We can see that through the census. And a lot of people think the census just counts people, and it does count people. But the census does a lot of different things, and one of the things that it does is that it tracks public education funding. And through that, we can see Baltimore City in 2017 was the 3rd most funded large school system in America. And it still is today, about 2nd or 3rd, somewhere in there. We could also see through federal data, the National Assessment of Educational Progress, that Baltimore City was one of the lowest performing large school systems in America. So Project Baltimore's question when we started in 2017 was simply, how can that happen? How can you have one of the most funded large school systems in America that year after year is also one of the lowest performing large school systems in America? And the reason that I wrote Failure Factory, the reason I wrote this book, is because after 9 years, I think that we have figured it out. I think that we have an answer. So throughout the afternoon, it's not the morning, throughout the afternoon here, I'm going to take you through how we came to the answer. But first, I want to play a video for you. This was a story that aired about a week and a half ago. We do 2 stories a week, Monday and Wednesdays, at 10 o'clock. They re-air Tuesdays and Thursdays, and everything's obviously on social media. But I want to play this video, and then we're going to talk about the video, and then how it relates to our original question in 2017. How can this happen? How can this be allowed to happen? And then we're going to get into the answer. Ready?
Ready.
The CEO of Baltimore City Schools is receiving national recognition. She's a finalist for National Superintendent of the Year.
But as Project Baltimore's Chris Babs explains, some feel the many scandals during Dr. Santelisa's tenure should disqualify her.
I was flabbergasted.
Yolanda Pooley is a former Baltimore City mayoral candidate and founder of People Empowered by the Struggle. Pooley attended Baltimore City public schools. So did her children and grandchildren. Do you think Baltimore City public schools is a good school system?
No, I think that at this point, it's nothing but failure, failure, and failure factory.
Which is why Pooley was stunned that City School CEO, Dr. Sonia Santelisa's
has recently been named a finalist for the 2026 National Superintendent of the Year Award.
This woman has failed us on so many levels, has failed our children on so many levels.
According to the School Superintendents Association, Santelises was named a finalist for her nearly 10 years as CEO, where she achieved steady, sustainable progress in academics, community engagement, student wholeness, and leadership development among district staff.
This release mentions many of Dr. Santelises' accomplishments, such as recently being named superintendent in residence at the Broad Center at Yale University. But what this release does not mention are the many scandals the CEO has presided over. Scandals Pulley says should disqualify her from any award.
So I'm trying to make sense to me.
In 2017, 1 year after Santelises became CEO, Project Baltimore sued city schools after the district refused to release public documents related to claims of grade changing. In 2019, the case went to court, where Circuit Court Judge Jeannie Hong ruled that city schools willfully and knowingly violated the law by not releasing the documents. Judge Hong ordered city schools to release more than 8,000 records and pay Fox 45's legal fees of nearly $200,000. When we received the records, we were able to show that failing grades were being changed to passing throughout the city to move students to the next grade.
If you're setting them up for failure, this is a way of doing it.
In 2022, Maryland's Inspector General for Education found, over a 4-year period, more than 12,500 failing grades were improperly changed to passing, with an estimated 10% of students at some schools graduating who should not have. Later in 2022, city schools found itself mired in another major scandal when the district was forced to refund the state more than $350,000 after Fox 45 exposed that many students were falsely enrolled at Augusta Fells High School.
2017 all the way up.
This student was enrolled while in jail.
When I signed up for no classes, I was dropped out, left the school.
An Inspector General report found over a 5-year period, nearly 1,000 students were improperly enrolled, costing taxpayers nearly $10 million. In 2023, Project Baltimore reported how 40% of Baltimore City's high schools did not have one student who tested proficient on the state math exams. In 2025, Baltimore City Schools was publicly named as the only K-12 district in America to be investigated by the U.S. Department of Education for claims of anti-Semitism.
Do you think the school system has at all improved under Dr. Santelises?
No. No, I think she actually made it worse, to be honest.
Fox 45 News wrote the School Superintendents Association asking if it was aware of these scandals. The association did not directly answer the question. Instead, we received a statement that describes that a blue ribbon panel picks winners, explaining the process is designed to be fair, consistent, and focused on professional district leadership and service to students and communities.
Have they lost their freaking mind? It's not like it's not public information. If they had did their due diligence in their investigation, they would have known that this woman was a failure from beginning to end.
Dr. Santelises' contract is set to expire in June. She has said she will not seek an extension. The CEO is a finalist alongside superintendents from Kentucky, Texas, and Maine. The winner will be announced in the coming weeks. I'm Chris Pabst, and this is Project Baltimore. Okay, so let's talk about that. Maryland may soon have the National Superintendent of the Year. We're going to find out in a couple weeks. And I think that what is really telling to me is that when I contacted this organization, they didn't even address the question. I don't think they even knew about any of these scandals. And quite frankly, it's because I'm not sure they care. I'll tell you why. So here's the book, Failure Factory: How Baltimore City Public Schools Deprive Taxpayers and Students of a Future. The grade-changing scandal that you saw, that we talked about, the entire thing is in this book. The book is really, the first 12 chapters are sort of taking you through that grade-changing scandal because it was so significant and it was so major in telling people how the school system is operating and why it's operating that way. So as you saw, in 2017, we sued the school system. In 2019, it went to court. I testified for a few hours when it went to court. And then in February or March of 2019, the judge ruled that the city school willfully and knowingly violated the law. What the judge said was they knew they were violating Maryland state law, but they did it anyway. They did it anyway. And the judge's words, and you can read them in the book, is that she believed city schools violated state law to hide possible wrongdoing. So you have a school system that you're paying $1.7 billion to. Your taxes went up last year, and your fees went up last year, $1.6 billion. And largely because of education spending. And you have a school system that is 75% funded by state taxpayers in Baltimore, that a circuit judge ruled was violating state law to hide possible wrongdoing. Can you really think of anything more significant than that when it comes to public education? There were no calls in Baltimore City for the CEO to step down. No calls at all. You had to pay our legal fees of nearly $200,000 because city schools chose, according to the judge, to violate state law. So now, every time you pay your vehicle registration fee that's gone up, every time you pay your vehicle emissions, every time you pay your new 6% vending machine tax, think about where some of this money is going. Now, keep in mind, the judge is the one who said, hey, you need to pay Fox 45's legal fees because we never should have gone to court. This never should have gone to court. They forced us to sue them. So what did we get? 8,000 documents. What was in those documents? Well, in the book, I go over in great detail what's in those documents, but essentially what it is are emails from teachers begging the school system not to go into the grade book and change failing grades to passing. It's teachers who are saying, how did this kid graduate? I failed him in Spanish. Spanish is a required course to graduate in the state of Maryland. How did this kid walk across the stage and graduate? Because somebody in the administrative office went into the grade book, changed the grade from failing to passing without the student doing any extra work so that student could graduate. 8,000 emails, multiple dozens, more than 24 internal investigations from city schools, from complaints of teachers and other people in the school system saying this is happening. And this is Baltimore City Schools investigating Baltimore City Schools. Like this is a fox in the hen house type of situation. So you can imagine how many internal investigations there should have been if there were an external auditor or external investigator who was looking into this. This is all that we got from the lawsuit. That lawsuit led to the Inspector General for Education to do his investigation, which found the 12,542 improper grade changes. Now what that is that's kids that failed a class, kids that did not master the material in a particular grade. Somebody went into the grade book, changed that grade to passing, to move that kid who had not mastered the material in one grade to move them to a next grade. with upwards of 10% of kids at some schools graduating who did not earn it. Not my words, Inspector General for Education's words. If that's not outrageous, if that's not fraud, what is? Graduating kids who didn't earn it? You know how many people got indicted, got arrested by the state of Maryland? None. CEO still there. Might be the National Superintendent of the Year. And this happened. This is all documented in state records. Don't even take Chris Papp's word for it. Everything in this book comes directly from the Maryland State Department of Education, the Inspector General for Education, or Baltimore City Public Schools themselves. So why would you do this? Why would you go into a grade book if you're an administrator? Why would you change the grade to pass a student who does not deserve to pass? You saw Rick Henry, the Inspector General for Education, who said, if you want to set up a kid to fail, this is how you do it. You push them through a school system where they can't get the education or aren't getting the education that they need to be able to take care of themselves and their family. I think most everybody would agree with that. Rick Henry said it. Why would a school system do it? Anybody? Why would a school system do it? Money.
Yeah, but where?
But how does it make them money?
Right.
How does doing that make a school system money? That is why I wrote this book, because this book answers that question. And here's the answer. The answer is that public education no longer prioritizes education. It prioritizes the acquisition of funding. That funding is then used to hire adults that then grow the political power and influence of public education. Now, don't take my word for it, all right? In this book, I go from school year 2016-17, when Project Baltimore started, and I go 8 school years to 2024, which is the most recent year for which we have data, because educational data lags a year. And I lay it all out for you to read. You can see exactly where the money's coming in from, exactly where the money is going, and what are the academic student outcomes that are a result of that. What are you paying for? What's the return on that investment? So in the back of this book, in the last chapter, I put together a chart. Here's a chart right here. So this chart goes over the 8 school years that I just spoke of. And in the chart, I lay out, and this is all Maryland State Department of Education data, I go over budget enrollment, cost per student, graduation rate, SAT average scores, mean AP grade exam, attendance, dropout rate, chronic absenteeism, college enrollment, National Assessment of Educational Progress, state and federal testing, and I go over every year how those scores were recorded, how they did. I then get into the money, and I go over the number of people that are working in the school system, what those people's titles are, how much money they're making, how much money they're getting in raises every year. And I do this over an 8-year period. So let's talk a little bit about this. In 2017, when Project Baltimore began, that school year, which would be the 2016-2017 school year, Baltimore City Public Schools had a $1.3 billion budget. In the 2023-2024 school year, which was 8 school years later, 1.7. So the school system got $400 million additional dollars a year, which would be about a 30% increase in funding. So you're paying Baltimore City Schools 30% more over those 8 years. How do students do? The graduation rate in 2017, anybody know? Anybody take a guess at what the graduation rate in 2017 was in city schools? 30%. I heard a 30, what? No, 70. Lowest in the state, but 70%. After a 30% increase in funding and 400, it's the 4-year cohort. Yes, four-year cohort graduation rate. In 2024, after you gave the school system a 30% increase in funding, what was the graduation rate? 70. It didn't change. You gave the school system $400 million additional dollars a year, and the graduation rate didn't move. Math proficiencies. In 2017, the math proficiency rate in Baltimore City schools was 11%. After $400 million additional dollars a year in 2024, the math proficiency rate was 10%. 90% of the kids in Baltimore City schools are not proficient in math. Think about that. 90%, with $1.7 billion going into that school system. Literacy rate, 27. So 27% of the kids are proficient in reading.
And
This is
proficient in reading at what level?
at their grade level. Yeah. So state testing is 3rd through 8th grade, and then they have stuff in high school as well. So a couple more data points here that we can sort of look at. Just to further prove the point, attendance, 2017, 87%. Attendance in 2024, 85%. Average SAT score in 2017. All right, these are kids that want to go to college. Not everybody takes the SAT. The average SAT score in Baltimore City schools in 2017, 910. The average SAT score in 2024, 867. $400 million additional dollars. That's what you're paying for. So school systems get their money based on one thing, enrollment. The number of kids are enrolled. So you pay per student. That's how schools get your money. The number of kids they have enrolled is the number of kids that they're getting funded. So we go back to the question that we asked before. Why would a school system change grades to pass kids to eventually give them a diploma? How does that go back to acquiring more funding? Because the funding is based on enrollment. So if you have a kid who is moving through the school system and thinks they'll eventually get to 12th grade and graduate, that child is more likely to stay enrolled. And if that child is more likely to stay enrolled, then the school system will get about $22,000, $23,000 a year from K to 12. I mean, obviously it fluctuates every year, but that's where we're at now, about $23,000 a year. So that's why they're doing it, because it keeps the kid more likely to be enrolled. Because if you continue to fail kids, the belief is there's a greater chance that that child is going to drop out. And if that child drops out, the school doesn't get the money. So in this book, I talk to teachers who say Baltimore City schools are graduating kids who can't read the diploma that is being given to them. And this is how that happens. So I wrote Failure Factory because I said in the beginning of my speech that I think I have figured out why you have one of the most funded large school systems, but one of the lowest performing. And it's because the school systems are not prioritizing educating kids. They're prioritizing the acquisition of funding. And all you really need to do, if you want to look at an organization and see what it prioritizes, is where it's getting better. Baltimore City Schools is really good at getting money. They've gotten a 30% increase in the past 8 or 9 years. But their graduation rate is stagnant. Math proficiencies are down. All the other things that we just talked about, like attendance, for example, SAT scores, they're all getting worse. So where's the school system putting its priorities? Into what it's good at, which is acquiring that funding. Over the 8 school years, you may be asking where the money go. Now, that's one of the main questions Project Baltimore had when we started. in 2017. Where's the money going? Well, I'll tell you. It's in the chart, but I've memorized it.
It's almost like you've done this before.
Yeah, it's like I've done this before. So in 2017, Baltimore City Schools had 5,142 teachers. Keep that in your head. 5,142 employed teachers. In 2024, with $400 million additional dollars, and this is not a joke, this is from the Maryland State Department of Education, they had 5,142 teachers.
Oh my God.
They didn't hire any additional teachers. Not one. $400 million more dollars. They didn't hire any teachers, but they hired 1,300 additional employees. The school system has roughly 1,300 more people working for it now than it did in 2017. But none of them are teachers. So what are they? Director level positions, people in central office, assistant superintendents, more people in the C-suite, more people in the administrative offices. That's where your money is going. So again, I'll get to you in 1 second. So it comes back to, what's the priority of the school system? If the priority were to educate kids and you got $400 million additional dollars, what would you hire? Teachers. They didn't. They didn't hire teachers. And if you think Baltimore County is immune to this, it's not. In this book, I talk about Baltimore County and what Baltimore County is doing as well. Because the whole purpose of me writing Failure Factory was a warning to the country. To show the country what is happening in Baltimore, the educational mindset in Baltimore, and how it's spreading throughout the entire country, and has already been spread to many places around the country. This is the playbook. But when we do these stories and we talk about them, you saw 40% of the high schools in Baltimore City did not have one student that could pass the state math exam. Not one. Nearly half of the high schools couldn't do it. Did you hear Brandon Scott say anything about that? Did you hear Wes Moore say anything about that? Did you hear any politician or elected official in Baltimore City say this is not acceptable? We demand that the school system do more? No. What'd you get? The superintendent could be National Superintendent of the Year.
Ooh.
Which goes back to the premise of the book. It's not about the kids. If it were about the kids, that wouldn't happen. It's about the adults. And I'll take some questions here in a second, but I just want to get to one more point that I think is relevant. Is when I started Project Baltimore in 2017, I had already developed a fairly good reputation as being an investigative reporter in DC. And I had people come to me, some of them administrators in the school system, some of them former administrators, some of them high-ranking people at the Maryland State Department of Education. And they would say to me, listen, if you're going to do this, if you're really going to devote your professional life to this, this is what you're going to find. You are going to find that the school systems are not there for the kids. They're there for the adults and to grow the power and influence of the public education system. Now, this is 2017, and as I told you in the beginning, my dad was a public school teacher for 35 years in Pennsylvania. I went to public schools K through 12, so did my brother. I didn't believe it. I did not believe it. I didn't want to believe it. Nobody wants to believe that. But from doing this every single day of my professional life for 9 years, I will fight like hell and convince people it's true. Because all the data and all the stories that I get from teachers and parents that I talk to in this book, all of it goes back to that being true. You just have to look at the data, keep an open mind, and really analyze the data and understand the data's real. If you don't hire any additional teachers when you get 30% increases in funding, what do you do? That's where we are. And that's where a lot of the other school systems are going. Because public education has become the vehicle to acquire wealth. And I'll end on this and then I'll take questions. Oh, that's me. I thought Santa Lisa's was still up there. Anybody know how much money she makes? She makes about $500,000. Woo! So, this is kind of a sidetrack, but I'll do this as I'm here. What school systems do is they hide how they're paying people. So if you go on the Maryland State Department of Education's website and you look up her salary, it's going to be $350. But if you look at her contract and you add up all the additional perks, she gets to $500,000. $500,000 a year. She gets additional annuities. She gets, I think it's 60 paid days off a year. 60. 12 weeks. So where's the scam there? The scam is that when she doesn't use it, she cashes it in. So this is how superintendents and people in public education make a lot more money than you realize it, because they hide things like that in contracts. She has a vehicle allowance, $800 a month to purchase her own vehicle. And she has a driver and a car supplied to her by Baltimore City Public Schools. You got to add that into the compensation. She has additional annuities that you're paying for, separate retirement accounts. And 10% of the kids in her school system were proficient in math in 2024. She violates state law by not handing over public documents. And if you read this book and you look at all the other scandals and everything else that we're uncovering, I wrote the book so people understand what's really going on. Because I don't think people do. Because if they did, they wouldn't put up with this and allow this to happen. So I just wanted to thank you again for having me. I'll take as many questions as I already coached a basketball game this morning, so I'm good. So I can head out whenever. Yes. Yeah. So the question is about the blueprint for Maryland's future. Everybody knows what that is? That's okay. That's the bill that's bankrupting the state. All right. So the blueprint for Maryland's future, I think the intent there was good. I've interviewed Rick Kerwin. I know Ike Leggett well. I think they're good people. I think their law, not only is it bankrupting the state, but it's impossible to implement. And when I say impossible, I mean it is impossible to implement. And the reason it's impossible to implement is because in order for the blueprint to work, and I had Ike Leggett tell me this. You guys know who Ike Leggett is? Okay, so he's a former county executive in Montgomery County, and he's also the chair of the Accountability and Implementation Board, which is the board that was put together to implement the blueprint. Good guy, I like him. Very honest. And the reason that it can't work is because the entire blueprint is predicated on one thing. The state has to hire about 13,000 to 15,000 additional teachers. If the state can't do that, the blueprint cannot be implemented, because the entire concept of it is increasing the number of teachers to lower class sizes and really target instruction to kids. It's a great idea. It's impossible. And the reason it's impossible is because the teachers don't exist. The human beings do not exist to do this. There are not 13 to 15,000 teachers that are available to hire to bring into the state of Maryland. So remember last year, Wes Moore said that he wanted to delay by 4 years something called teacher collaboration time. You guys follow the news? You kind of remember that? Okay. The inside baseball track of that is the bill. That's the part of the bill that says you have to hire 13 to 15,000 additional teachers, because if you increase teacher collaboration time, which is essentially time that teachers aren't in the classroom so they can collaborate on other things, you need to hire teachers to fill that additional time, which means statewide, you need 13 to 15,000 teachers. So why did Wes Moore say, let's put a 4-year moratorium on that? Because he knows it's not possible. So if he can delay it for 4 years, he gets through the next 2 elections, and then he's out of office. Politically, it's a brilliant move. But for all of you that pay taxes, it's a disaster. And so what the legislature did was they settled on 2. So this year, it hasn't been implemented. Next year, the implementation is supposed to start again, and that's when your taxes are going to go up again, because those additional teachers, if they can even find them to hire, are going to have to be paid for. Yes? Oh. Yeah, good. Yeah. Sure. Yeah. So I'll repeat it. I'll repeat it. Is that the question? All right, so the question was, 10 years ago, when proficiency was really starting to drop in Baltimore City schools, they came up with this concept that it was because of lead in paint chips. And I mean, I think there might be something to that, but if you look back over 10 or 15 or 20 years, there's always a reason. The reason was we don't have air conditioning in the schools. Well, every school now in Baltimore City has air conditioning, so they can't use that anymore. So then they go to, well, we have really old building stock. Well, because of 21st century school building, Baltimore City has many new beautiful school palaces. So they really can't use that anymore. So then we'll go to paint chips, lead in paint chips. We'll go to violence. The city's too violent, kids can't learn. There's always a reason. But if you read this book, the reason that I think we are where we are, well, there's a couple, but I'll give you one. In 2014, in January of 2014, President Obama came to Baltimore, and he gave a speech, and he said that there's a disproportionate amount of young black males that are being suspended and being arrested in school. So he had concluded that it's because of discrimination in public schools. So he sent guidance to all 50 states. And he said, listen, you have to lower your suspensions, you have to lower your arrests, because clearly you are discriminating against certain groups. Okay, that's 2014. So in the book, I go over the data and what the data looked like. Baltimore City Schools arrests went down 98%. So in like 2010, Baltimore City Schools was arresting about 900 kids a year. 900. By 2020, which didn't include COVID, it's the year after COVID, but that's when the data comes out, is 2020. It was 18. They went from 900 arrests a year to 18. So City Schools celebrates this, and they're telling people, look at how safe our schools are. Look at this is amazing. Okay, there's two main things to look at here. When you really look nationally, America's public schools peaked around 2013. Right about 2014, you can see that proficiency rates throughout the entire country started to drop. And why did they drop? Because the school systems were keeping disruptive students in the class. They were no longer taking disruptive students out of the classroom. Now, in a place like Baltimore City is 93% minority. So if you're going to arrest a kid or suspend a kid, chances are they're probably going to be minority. But the other major aspect of this that we really dig into in Failure Factory is starting at the same time, about 2014, you see bullying complaints start to go up. So as the schools quit suspending or arresting kids, bullying complaints began to increase. And I talked to a lot of kids in this book that were the victims of that bullying. And if you get bullied in school and you keep disruptive students in school, it's a lot more difficult to learn. And by the way, in a school system like Baltimore City that's 93% minority, who are most of the bullying victims? They're minorities. So I make the case that what President Obama did in 2014 to help minorities hurt more minorities than it helped. Because if you had 900 kids in Baltimore City getting arrested, the bullying complaints far exceeded that. Now you're into thousands of kids being bullied that aren't learning, as opposed to 900 kids that were arrested for bringing guns and knives and things into schools. Is the reason for what? Oh, the Parkville stuff? I'm not an expert on that. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Baltimore just had a great article today about foreign teachers coming in and making reading. And there was one county, I don't remember, that teachers $75 for people coming in and they want reading. And the government saying, well, that's because teachers say they couldn't make enough money, so they can't get enough people. And just thought that was very interesting. I would look for increase in foreign teachers coming in. They don't have 13,000.
Oh, it's already happened. Yeah, a lot of foreign teachers are coming in, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. I mean, if they're a qualified teacher and they can help American kids, sure, bring them in. I mean,
What you're doing though is they're paying them driving down.
So the other thing that I talk about in the book is when President Obama came out with that 2014 guidance, you also see the number of people that want to get into public education going down. Because teachers get into teaching to teach. They want to help kids. But if you have a classroom of 25 and you have a very disruptive kid that the principal just keeps putting into your class, you can't do your job and you can't feel fulfilled as a human. And I would argue that the teacher shortage we have is not a result of people not wanting to be teachers. It's people not wanting to be in the current environment that has been created by public schools. But that's a whole nother issue, but that's a big one. Yeah.
So, first off, Chris, I want to thank you for doing this because, quite frankly, I don't know how you kept your sanity. I mean that sincerely. Before I ask my question, other than Fox 45 locally, did any of the other TV stations do any type of reporting on this? No.
The question was, over the past 8 years with Project Baltimore and Fox 45 doing this reporting, did the other television stations in the area follow us at all? No.
Not at all. Okay, so that being said, therefore, a limited portion of the population in Maryland even know. So my true question is, if you think about this, and everything that you just beautifully laid out, who in the world is on the organization that is determining that this woman should even be considered for anything other than prison?
They did not say who's on the blue ribbon panel.
So, and I think maybe if there's a part two, find out who are these blind, deaf, and dumb appointees that are even considering of the entire United States. Not this, I leave you with this. If you haven't watched The Wire, watch The Wire. The Wire was made in about 2002. There was an entire episode, if not more, about the absolute anarchy in Baltimore City schools back then. So, thank you.
Season 3, I think.
Yes, thank you.
Yes.
A question and a comment. My question is, vis-a-vis graduation rates, if grades had not been changed, what do you think the rates would be? My comment is, I went to Cava, the price was $11.93. I gave $20.03. She couldn't do it without a calculator, and she used a calculator and she still screwed it up. And I had to tell her what it should be and explain why.
Yeah.
3 cancels out. $11.90, $20.
Yeah, that's real. So the question was, if grades weren't changed, what would the graduation rates be? Well, I only have the IG's report to go by, and he said 10% graduated who should not have. So 70%, 10% of that would be 7, so maybe 63%. And even at that, so if you're listening to my presentation, one of the things that I generally come back to is I don't know if anyone thought to themselves or scratched their head, how can you have 70% graduation rates when 10% of your kids are proficient in math? How does that even work? Because it goes back to the original premise. School systems aren't there to educate kids. It's not their priority. Their priority is the funding. All the data comes back to that one point. Yes? Okay, the question is, what influence do the unions have? They're probably covered by a union. So there's many different unions. There's a teachers union, there's a principals union. I think ASME, is ASME, they're in the schools, right? ASME is in the schools. There's a lot of different unions. So as far as Maryland is concerned, the most powerful political entity is teachers union, without a doubt. So I think 10 or 15 years ago, my understanding was the Catholic Church, the NRA, and the teachers union. Well, when Mike Miller and the old guard kind of left, and the Catholic Church is obviously having issues. They're no longer the powerful entity they used to be. The NRA is no longer the powerful entity, but the teachers union is getting more powerful. I mean, that is the most powerful entity in the state. I mean, they're so powerful that they don't even bother to return media requests. They just don't care. I email them, and they don't even respond to me because it doesn't matter. They have so much power. They just don't care. You had a question before, right? Yeah. Can somebody translate that? I heard some words in there, but not all of them. Anybody? You say it a little louder. Just what's the question?
She can come up to the. How far does that go? The cord.
Why is there such a talk about discrimination?
Sure. So.
And it's
Yeah. So the question is, why is there such pushback on school choice? Well, if you go to the union's page, the teachers' union's page, their explanation for why they're against school choice is because they say that it takes public dollars away from public schools. That's one of their main arguments for why they don't like school choice. So, for example, if there's vouchers and you can use that voucher to go to a parochial school, Catholic school, private school, the unions are saying that if you take that money out of the public school system, you weaken the public school system. That's their main reason for being against school choice. Their other reason is that what they say is we should not have some good schools that every kid wants to go to. Their argument is that we should work to make sure that every school is fantastic. That's the argument. The problem is we're in 2026 and we're nowhere near every school being fantastic. So that's kind of like sunshine and lollipops. Like if we're not anywhere near that in 2026, we're not going to get anywhere near that. But that's generally the opposition to it. Yeah. Yeah. The school system has been out against the collegiate school for boys for a long time. And the way that the charter laws in Maryland were written, and this is really interesting, I also talk about this in Failure Factory as well, is that when the charter school law in Maryland was written, it was written in such a way that in order for a charter school to get approved, the school system in which that charter school wants to charter itself has to agree. So in other words, Baltimore City Schools has to approve its own competition. And it would be very similar to if I lived in a town and I owned a bunch of McDonald's, that I would have to approve a Burger King coming in. I would have to approve my own competition. But that's how the charter school law in Maryland was written. They have to approve it. And then every 3 or 5 years, they have to reapprove it. So if they don't like a charter school, they just get rid of it. And they find statistics to get rid of that charter school. And with Boys Collegiate, there's like 400 kids that go there, which means there's 400 kids, probably around 350 families that want to go there. They're not zoned for that school. They're choosing to go to that school. And Baltimore City Schools just took that away from them.
Right back here.
Oh, yes.
My question is, this has been going on a long time, even before your book. I'm a product of Baltimore City Schools, and they were failing us back then. Is it an attack on African American boys? Because Dr. Claude Anderson of the Heritage Foundation says that with the destabilized black community in Baltimore City, they only have 2 outlets, and that's crime and welfare. And then there was a school-to-prison pipeline before this. How do we fix that divide, and how do we fix the school system? And if it's an attack on the inner city people, how do they fight back?
By voting. The question was, how do you fight back against this? How do you improve it? And it's really just a matter of, you got to vote for the right people. You got to vote for politicians that are going to hold the school system accountable, and politicians that are going to say, we're not going to give you $400 million additional dollars, and you give us the same exact graduation rate. Somebody within Maryland, somebody within Baltimore City has to demand more, not give awards to somebody who has presided all of this. I mean, I'll end on this. I mean, think about it this way. We talked about how the CEO of City Schools makes about $500,000 a year for 10% of her kids being proficient in math. What's the motivation to get better? If someone's paying you $500,000 a year and that's your result, why would you get better? You wouldn't. The school system wouldn't, and the reason we know that is because it hasn't. It's a cycle every single year. Can we have one more question?
One more question.
One more. Go ahead.
Louder.
I can't hear a thing. You can come up here.
Yeah, come on up. Give her the microphone. Microphone.
No, I can. Yeah.
I've been working with children who learn differently for the past 20 years in a tutoring center. And I'm seeing more and more kids just falling through the cracks. I've recently heard, I think it was Baltimore Sun, or read about it, that the city or the county, they're using this particular avenue to defraud the state, to defraud the taxpayers. In other words, they have children who are not succeeding, and they send them to these different resource tutors or resource centers, similar to what's going on in Minnesota with the Somalis and the daycare centers. And I'm wondering if you've heard anything about that. And one more thing.
Yeah.
During my 20 years of working with these children and seeing the education center system in play, I think that we're actually looking at a Marxist agenda to dumb down our children. I think the dumber our children, the easier they are to control. And I think the only way we're going to get anything better here in the state of Maryland, because of the leadership that continues to be elected, is for the federal government to come in and start investigating probably a lot of the potential fraud that's going on in our education system.
Yes. All right, so that's a long answer, but essentially the question was the issue of vendors getting money to educate kids. So you're paying a teacher in a school system to educate kids that aren't being educated. So then the schools send those kids somewhere else where you're paying for them to be educated. And there's a long answer to that, but I can just sum it up this way. When you have $1.7 billion going into a school system, people want the money. They want the money. It's not about educating kids, it's about the money. It's a way to acquire wealth. That's really largely what it's become. But thank you so much. I really appreciate your time.